So much in the Chemer, but there's so much which surrounds the halachas themselves, and sometimes what's for one person a mitzvah is for one person an aveda, so to speak. So it's very, very hard to give a simple 1, 2, 3, these are the halachas, knock them off, so to speak. Okay, you learned them, you remember them, now go practice them. So such dinim, which are black and white, obviously, there's no room to maneuver around them, that's what it is. Sometimes there's things which are a gray area, so to speak, that in halacha there's space for both mahalchim, so to speak, but you can't say it publicly, because what's for one person okay is for another person not okay. So this is a very, very difficult topic, and a lot of times it's also a sensitive topic, just the halachas themselves. So before we get to the actual dinim, I just want to start with a few nakudas, very, very important points. That there was once a story of somebody, I believe it happened with a wife of somebody. They went to a review class, and she came back very disappointed. I didn't learn anything new. You know, I took time off, I got babysitting, I made all the arrangements to go. I came to the shiur, and I'm coming home with no new information. Can anyone guess what was the husband's response? Baruch Hashem. You know, the fact that you just has the dinim, and you're up to date, you know what to do, you know the dinim of the shivnikim, how to make bedikas. Baruch Hashem, you didn't learn anything new. And all you did was refresh the information in your mind. So the emes is, you can ask a shayla, what are we doing over here? Because ultimately, the Torah says, v'safra law, it's a mitzvah really on the isha, right? She has a chiyuv to make the b'dika, she has a chiyuv to keep the calendar, to make sure the husband's aware. So ultimately, all we have to do is chazar our chakis, and that's about it, right? The answer is no. And I'll tell you a story. I chazared it with Rabbi before, and I think it's a very important story for people to know and to remember. One time, when I was going to the Ritzina Dayan, a shayla came in and was trying to find a tzad heter. The husband called. I don't remember offhand if it happened with Shas Meiser, I just told it over to us. So he started asking questions. What about this? The husband says, I don't know. Okay, and what about this? I don't know. The next thing, I don't know. Everything was, I don't know. I don't know if he actually asked, but he was probably thinking in the back of his mind, are you married? You don't know what's going on with your wife. So, what's the nukah over here? The nukah is, he put it, his masculine very, very nice, in a very nice way. This is not the derech of Yiddishkeit. You don't throw a burden on somebody and then expect to just get your chelak out of it. When it comes to Taras Mishpacha, there's a shutfas between the Baal and the Isha. Sometimes you have to be sensitive, you have to be careful. Sometimes it's very hard for the wife. Sometimes Pashat making regular bedikas hurts. Right? Sometimes it's embarrassing to bring a shayla to a Rav. It's not comfortable, you know, I'm bringing a part of my body, you're going to tell me it's good, it's no good. Who are you to say what's good and no good in my body? You know, it's, leave me alone. So the husband has to have a sensitivity and realize that these are the thoughts that may be going through the wife's mind. Whether they're right or wrong, the Metzius is, this is the facts that some people may feel this way. So the husband's responsibility, not just a nice thing to do, his responsibility is to try to make it easier in whatever way possible that he could. If she doesn't feel up to it, to bring a shayla, make yourself available, take a 5-minute break from your work, run out of the office, bring the shayla. If she's having a hard time with the b'dika, she's too embarrassed to call the Rav, you call the Rav. Make yourself available to make it easier for the wife. And also, you have to be ma'eder that it's very important to ask shaylas. Why? Why not to be ma'eder this? Many, many times, you may think this is an exaggeration, but I'll tell you it's not. If a person doesn't ask shaylos, there's no shayla about it that they're going to either be to machmer on themselves or to make on themselves. And I'll give you many degmars that come up. Sometimes somebody calls up the shayla, they're already holding the fourth day of the Shiv Nekim, and somehow in the conversation it's nizbarer that she was never a nida to begin with. She might have seen something on the tissue. She didn't really see anything. She threw it down. She said, whatever, I'm not interested in the whole thing. Let me just do the 5 and 7. So you're already holding 5 days. You're, right? Before you count Shiv Nekim, you have to wait 5 days no matter what. You're already holding on day 4, so you already lost 9 days. Shalom tzedek. Absolutely no reason. But if a shayla was asked, this whole thing would have not been necessary. So it's extra akavas nefesh, extra whatever it is, for absolutely no reason. So the importance, when you have a shayla, don't be machlet on yourself that it's a problem, and also the opposite. Don't be machlet and write it off. Oh, nothing happened. Big deal. I asked the shayla 3 years ago, something similar, and the Rav said, yeah, it's 100% fine. So obviously it's the same thing over here. It works both ways. Another very important nekuda connected to this is the reality is every family has to have a Rav that they call with shaylos. It's not a mahalach to call whoever's available. Whoever's going to answer first, or whoever is going to give me a green light, so to speak, faster, I'll try to have them before anybody else. And I'll explain to you why. When a Rav knows who's talking to them, he knows the matziv, he knows the history of where they're holding, if there's factors of shalom bayis, if there's factors of shuruvu, which these are very, very strong factors in halacha. If somebody is suffering midiyim or the shalom bayis, I'll tell you a story. No, there's a guy here sitting Shiva from Lakewood. It wasn't a story with him. There was another guy in Lakewood. Shmuel. No, he's sitting Shiva now. Not Felder. With Shmuel Meir Katz. There's once a story. I just heard it this Sukkos. There's a certain din that we apply. That's the cloud. This is what we go by. I heard it from his Talmud. He was there b'shas Ma'aseh. This Talmud was in the room when it happened. There's a certain man that came with a shayla, and there was nothing to talk about. It was for sure one way. I'm not going to say what the shayla was, so you shouldn't learn from it that, you can just do whatever you want. Well, not you, but it shouldn't be learned from. So the younger man comes with the shayla. The Rav knows who he's dealing with. The Rav knows that she's having a very hard time becoming queen. And they're having a very, very hard time with Shalom Bayis. It goes months and months and months, and the matzah is very, very difficult. The Rav looks at the shayla, and he looks at the younger man and he says, it's good. The younger man says, thank you, smiles, leaves. The Talmud is, what on earth just happened over here? What, so if you knew his matzah, well, you have to. There's a nice one, the Cheskel, they say B'Shnoi. I don't know if it actually happened with him. Everyone's going to say B'Shem somebody else. It's not to be repeated, but this Nakuda is it shows you why you have to have your own Rav. He says the Rav has to be a mol, he has to be ready to go to Gehenim for another youth. It doesn't mean that the Rav is Chalil being matter or something awesome, but well, you have to play with that Torah Adif, you have to work hard to be Matarish on the Beinoni. But if you don't have your own Rav, if you don't have somebody who knows your matzah and knows what you're going through, if you're not going through, chances are it's not going to happen. So that's why it's very important. You're calling with a shayla, come in person, the Rav knows who you are, the Rav can also read the Fiat where things are holding. And if it comes to a matzah where there's a tchak, a shas tchak, there's what to work with. It's not just a random person's calling. You're not going to get the same yacha, so to speak, as if the Rav knows what he's dealing with. And also, very important nekuda is not to be embarrassed. Why should you not be embarrassed? The thing is very embarrassing. It's private things. We have the Ramah, the last Ramah called Tzaddik Ches, that Adar Sheikhim Ibad these things are meant to be kept private. You're not supposed to be embarrassing it. It's a private thing. It's like sneers, it's whatever it is. So why should you not be embarrassed? The answer is very simple. The Torah wasn't embarrassed. There's a whole section of Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Nida that deals with all of these shilas. There's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of tshuvas written on all of these different things that happened, because this is Torah. When you look at it, that this is the Ratzon Hashem, what am I supposed to do, what am I not supposed to do, how can I go about to serve the Eibishter, this is no different than putting on tefillin. Right? This is the Eibishter's Ratzon through and through. Your Maisa is negayah to the Eibishter, and the Eibishter cares about your small Maisa. If you decide to do what's right, to follow Halacha B'Hiddur, your action has an effect, and it's tied by the Eibishter. And again, as was mentioned before briefly, the Rav's Matara, going back, he's looking at L'Tar Yishal L'Bayla. We know the Gemara tells us by David HaMelech, he says, Yodam L'Chochis B'Dam, L'Tar Yishal L'Bayla. When he's comparing himself to all the other kings of the world, they're busy sleeping at Shalishois, they're sitting with their crowns and their own kavod. And David HaMelech, what was he boasting, so to speak, about? He could have found many things to boast about. He has a son like Shlomo HaMelech. He's running an entire Klal Yisrael. What did he say is his chus? Yodam l'chlochis b'dam l'tar isha l'bayla. You have to realize this is mamish important to the Eibishter. This is what a Melech Yisrael. Imagine that the Rebbe says such a thing. The Rebbe is going to say, what am I busy with? David HaMelech was the Rebbe. And what did he say? What was he boasting about? That this is his gadlus? He was busy trying to be l'tar isha l'bayla. So we have to realize that the Cheshivas in India is so important to the Eibishter that these dinim are kept properly and not to be embarrassed. This is what the Eibishter wants. So with that Akdama, we'll start to chazer a little bit and we'll see how far we get to Mitzvah Hashem. So the first thing which is very important to know is Keitzad Isha Mitmas. How does one become a Nida? It's very important because from experience you'll see that there's a lot of gray areas and there has to be a klarkeit. Eventually the answer is going to be you have to ask a shayla, but at least you know what's a shayla. Derech you get a smicha, not to paskin, but at least you know when you have a shayla in your kitchen. So at least over here we'll discuss what's a shayla, what's not a shayla. So minatayra. In order for that to be Tumas Nidim Deiraisa, you need three conditions. Number one, there has to be something called Hargasha. Right? Sometimes Hargashim are not so good. Right? I'm not up to it. I'm all and tell you that the Torah is miskasha with Hargasha. But the reality is today there is no Hargasha. So Hargasha, the Pesach Shuvah brings 3 days. What does it mean Hargasha? We have Shittas Rambam. Is the Zeya Gufa. There's a shock in the body, and there's Re'iyas Dam that comes together with the shock. Go figure what that means, because the reality is it doesn't exist. If you tell me otherwise, you'll be the first. Then you have the Trumas Hadashin, which the Mechaber goes with, that there's Psichas Pia Makar. You feel the cervix opening up to release the dam. And the third type of Agasha is Zivas Davar Lach. Zivas Davar Lach literally means you feel a wet flow coming out. Now, this is a very debated shitta. The first time you find it is in Achreinim, the Native Yehuda, the Chavaz Das. Chassam Sefer does not hold of it. There's Tzadim Lakan, Tzemach Tzedek. The Alter Rebbe itself is not so simple. In Kuter Sachrim, Sefkat and Beis. With Begimel, the Alter Rebbe is Yemes Chashem with it. With the Rabbi, the Alter Rebbe is Yemes Chashem with it. Al Kapanim, I'll tell you a secret, even that is not matzah. So it doesn't really make a difference. Zivas Davar means you have to feel the wetness on the inside. You have to feel it as it's coming out. Today, that itself is a machlekes wet inside, but today, what's the common thing which is felt? Only aleichos mibachutz, only the wetness from the outside. That is not a hargasha. If somebody says, "Oh, I felt a hargasha because I felt wetness coming out," that's nothing. We're not mischashav with that. It does not make a difference. The second thing is, obviously, it has to be dam from the makar. It has to be dam from which comes from the uterus. So we're going to get to medical procedures in a second. But anything which is from outside the uterus, the cervix, the outer cervix, in the walls, this is nothing. It's called dam maka. Dam maka, there's no tumah when it comes to dam maka. And the third thing is, minatera has to be from the chameshes min damim. There's only 5 shades minatera which are tameh. It's very important to note. Nobody today knows what those are. Even the times of the Tanoim, there was already a header of the kiyos in what those matters were. So you have the Rosh, you have the Shach, the right, the today, Eilam Kiyim, and when the time anything red. Nafilu Neitel Adam. So practically what that means is any red is a problem. We don't know, and there's no real leeway. That's Midei Naisa. We'll get to in a second how can you have Midei Naisa. There's no Argasha, we'll do that in just a second. Then there's a Tumah Midei which is called Tumas Kasimov. Kasimov literally is translated to stains, but the Etzem HaKesem is something which does not have Argasha. It's an Iyas Dam Blei Argasha is a Tumah Midei. It's not an Issa Dei Naisa. Tumah Issa. So what does it mean a kesem? A kesem is you literally found a stain, and in order for it to be tameh, you have to have a few conditions. Number 1, it has to be on a white beged lova. It has to have a shiur kegris v'oid, which today is just under a dime. And we'll get into the qualifications of what has to be included in that kegris v'oid. And there's another type of kesem absara, kesem dam, which is found on the body. Now, there's a machlokes whether or not there has to be a shiur, which is a shaykh and the Rambam, whatever it is. There's a big machlokes if you have to have a shiur, kegris v'oid on the body or not. For that, this is one of the examples of it's a shayla you have to ask. But ultimately, if blood was found on the guf, it's only with Rabbanan. And the Mishnah says that lo yekol mekayim is not everywhere where you find blood is in the Tana. It has to be dafka somewhere where it's possible. The Mishnah lists out where those places are. Somewhere where it's shaykh for the dam to come. If you find dam over here, there's no tumah. We're not going to say that the dam came from there and you touched it over here, and then we're in the Tana. Then there's something else which is a big gray area. It's called the kinuch. Sometimes you could have a tissue. If you wipe yourself, the reality is it's a big gray area. Sometimes you can take one kinuch to one row, you'll get one sack. Sometimes you'll get to take the same shana to another row, you'll get a different sack. And they're both right. They're both right, because in halacha there's place for both tzdadim. It's a big machlekes. You can take the same Alter Rebbe and you can twist it both ways. A little not to twist it, but you can apply it 2 different ways. Or you're mischasher with this, or you're not mischasher with that. What's the shitto? It's a la'alacha, it's not la'alacha, whatever it is. The nekuda is it's a shayla. If a kinuach was found, don't write it off. If you still have it, drop it off. If it was flushed down, call it a shayla, but don't flush it down on purpose. It's a big misconception. You see something, you flush it, the Kasimov is going to tell you it's okay. Once it was flushed, that's a different din. But you can't go and flush it. I know, people think it's a trick. You flush it down, you call, and everything's okay. It's a misconception.
Newly married, maybe.
Newly married, yeah. Those guys make those mistakes. Let's go back to the first Nakuda. So we mentioned the difference between a deinaisa and the re'iyas dam, which is vadim agufa. If you saw dam leaving the body without argash, is also midrabanan. Whatever it is. So let's explore something for a second. You just mentioned that today there's no such thing as argasha, right? So there's no such thing as argasha. You can have a chacham and we'll get to that in a second. Let me just wear colored. Let me wear a pad, or a black pad, and I'll ignore the vest. I'm not going to look. It's colored. There's no argasha. Big deal. Life is great. There's no matumas nida, right? Just make sure don't look at tissues. Sounds good, right? So I'll tell you a secret. There were such people that had such a kav. And they invented something which is called the black pad. I may be saying very controversial things, but the black pad is a big problem for this specific reason. It was made in a special way that if somebody's told not to look, they will miss their period. They will miss their period if they don't look.
No, they didn't hear you. Repeat it. That was what
The black pad, I don't know if you saw it, you didn't see it, if you didn't see it, Shrefa, if you saw it, Shrefa, because you're learning about it now. The black pad is a big mikshah. What's a black pad? Today there's no argasha. And being that there's no argasha, a lot of people are told by the Rav not to look, right? Don't look at your tissues. Usually that's what it means. Do not look at your tissues. But it doesn't chalila mean to ignore your period. A black pad was designed that when you look at it, you don't see that anything actually came onto it. It was made by frum people, Hamisha people, for this specific purpose.
Why is it controversial?
Because a lot of people in Nichshel, they miss their period. It's designed in a way that you have your period. If you're not looking at your tissues, if you're not actively aware, you will miss your period. What's the problem? Very good. That's the $1 million question. We're going to address that in just a second. The problem is like this. Just because it's Argasha, it doesn't mean that the Re'iyah is no longer Metame. The lumbers behind it will leave on the side. There's many Mahalchim if you have to Farenfer that there's no Argasha, the Sultan was Biddu Bizman Hazeh. That's not for now. The Mukudah is if somebody has a Re'iyah, Eirach Tanoshim, if they have it, a flow, it's still Tumas Nidim Denaisa. It's still a flow. So to be Mailam Ayin, to pretend it's not happening, you're not fooling the Eibishter, you're fooling yourself. And I'll tell you a story. Somebody was using these pads. Again, if somebody used it, we're not going to say that Chalila and Afreya, that's what happened, but it's something you have to be aware of, that you can't ignore a flow. That's the reality. So I'll tell you a story. Once somebody came with a Shiloh. His wife felt that, something's starting. They didn't really see anything yet. But Hashgacha Pratis, his wife was wearing one of these black pants. And on the side, it's still white. When they stitch it together, on the side, you can still see there was something there. Hashgacha Pratis, for whatever reason, when the clothes was being put in the laundry, in the bin, the pad was not detached from the beged. And the husband, Hashgacha Pratis, saw a vein. The whole line is red. So he panicked. He came and he grabbed the Shiloh. He opened the pad and he saw that was the flow. The flow was there. The whole pad was soaked, so to speak. So that means the flow came, right? So just because it wasn't seen, it doesn't change the facts of the matter that the period did come. So it's a very important thing to note that if somebody's having a hard time to stay clean, to become clean, there are eitzes. You could use regular with a heter. Obviously, it's case by case, but I just want to point it out because it's important people should know. A regular disposable pad, even if it's white, has a din of a davar she'ein mekabel tumah. What do you gain by using a white pad? This way, you'll know whether or not there's a flow coming or not. There's no issue, there's no concern of maybe missing the flow. And you accomplish the same thing as a black pad. So if somebody's really having a hard time and they receive the heter to use it, any kasem which is found can be disregarded. We'll see in a second the close of Ksami. Sorry?
Even on the white.
Even on the white. Because as we mentioned, the only time that it's a problem on white if it's on a beged, if it's on a garment. On a beged, chazal or geyser, if it's a kigris v'ayt. On something which is a davar she'einu mekabel tumah, even if it's white, it doesn't make a difference. Another example of davar she'einu mekabel tumah, which is white, is a toilet. A toilet bowl. We have the Ramah, the big, the base, like he's saying, is a davar shein mekabel tumah, especially today, which is the actual basic piece is mechuber lekarka. So if a kesem, if a stain was found on the basic kisei, even in the water, yeah, man. You can say it here, the Vegan Yosef, Kubarov, was Mekel, and that's how the Paskin. If a kesem, not in the Iya, if a kesem was found, a stain was found in the toilet, even in the water, it's fine. And I want to point out, going weiter in Ksanim.
What's the difference in Kasimov?
Kasimov, today we measure by size.
See, practically, he's asking that if it was in the toilet, how would he know it's
So it's a very good shayla that was asked, but we were going around and around, but I didn't get to the point. What's the difference between a flow, a period, and Ksanim? A flow is today determined by size. Today, the shiur that's given, it's around half of $1 bill, or to make it easier, around the size of a credit card. If something reaches around that size, it's safe to assume that this is the flow. So, Kol's man, they're spotting that it's nowhere near that size. There's no reason to be patient, and maybe it's a flow. It's a kesem, and it has the pullahs of Ksanim, it has the leniencies of Ksanim. If it's found on the davar shein mekabel tumah, if it's found on a colored beged, it's not a problem. And when the Rav tells you not to look, that's what he's referring to. When you have Ksamim, don't make yourself problems, don't look. But to ignore a flow, to ignore a period, that for sure not. Now, the shiur of a credit card or a half $1 bill is not a gzeiras hakasa. We don't find this in the Paiskim. It's a hashara that comes from Rabbi Feinstein that the standard for reaching this size, whatever, however we're going to differentiate it. But it's important to point out that there's steady bleeding, there's cramps, it's around the time of the month. Just because it didn't reach that size, or if you're changing your pad, it doesn't change the fact that it may be a flow. This is a very big area of confusion for many people. And this is one of those times where you say, if you have a suffix, call with a shayla. Because there's so many factors, you're trying to build a picture. Is it around the time of the month? Is there cramping? Does it make sense to the flow? Is it just breakthrough bleeding? Especially if somebody's taking hormonal, obviously with the heter, hormonal medication, or forms of immunosuppression. You have to speak open because it causes bleeding. This is a large cause for Ksamim, and sometimes, which part? Immunosuppression is birth control. Sometimes if somebody's using birth control with a heter, obviously, it causes a lot of spotting. A lot of spotting, pills, the IUD. So you have to be very, very careful. There's going to be a lot of shaylas, and sometimes the answer is you have to call. It's not clear cut, and you need shikol hadas. So if somebody has a shayla, somebody has a suffix, a shayla should be asked. Now, also very important to point out is there's a din which many are not familiar with of ein psichas hakever b'loi dam. Ein psichas hakever b'loi dam literally translates to you cannot go into the rechem, you cannot open the rechem without the re'iyas dam. What does this have to do with us? If somebody is going through a medical procedure, either a regular checkup or testing, this is a very, very common thing. Many times the doctor will have to see in the uterus, or will have to insert something into the uterus. Or if somebody's getting an IUD inserted, which is something that goes into the uterus, this is a big shayla of ein psichas hakever b'loi dam. So practically what that means is when somebody's going for a checkup or for a medical procedure, you have to find out ahead of time the name of the procedure. You're going to the doctor, you have to find out, okay, what is the name of the procedure? What are you doing? Once you have the name of the procedure, ask how deep is the doctor going. Sometimes, for example, a pap smear, which is a yearly checkup or yearly test, what do? They scrape the outer cervix. Outer cervix is not a problem, and there will be some spotting, but it's not a problem. Why is that? Because in order to have a problem with ein psichas hakever b'leidam, you have to go past the cervix. There's a machlokes where in the cervix does it cause a problem. But if it's for sure only on the surface, that's, according to everybody, not a problem. And what do they do with the pap smear? They scrape the outside to collect some cells in order to test them to see if there's any growths or whatever it is. Often what happens is, you will find spotting on the tissue afterwards. As long as it's within reason, it's the same day, the next day, you are able to be taila that this is from the pap smear because there's a makkah. They scrape the surface. It is going to bleed. And
Do you rely on a doctor that's from?
here you don't need to.
No, I'm saying if you're doing a different procedure.
Oh, different procedure.
Can you rely on
It's
the
a very,
doctor
very
that's
good
from?
child. It's a very,
The
very
doctor
good child.
says it's not a problem. Like he knows
It's a
the.
very, very good child. Now, bonus areifin. What doctors can you believe? What doctors can you not believe? Yeah, that's right. So if it's a from a yid, obviously you could be saying on them. Sometimes the from yid are worse than the guy because they know the malach a bit better. Lazim it up. I know what I'm doing. Don't ask me questions. You're not a niddah. So they're overconfident in their position, but they'll be nisbal. You're not the only one who's asking them, and you're not the last one to ask them. So, if it's a guy or a yid who's not from, what's mekubal is you get a letter from them. If they say, "I found dam, but you have a mako. I scratched your cervix. It's not from the rechem." So they don't have nemanos alpidin. So what's mekubal is you should ask them to write you a letter on their letterhead. Sometimes they write a description. They have a little card with their official letterhead. Ask them, I examined plainness by plainness, and I found that there's a makom, shenitzi adam, on this and this place, and that's it. We're not asking for the doctor to give a psak. We're asking for the mitzias. Be mevada, what did you do? What did you find? If they write you a letter, this is enough. You should read it, yeah, sure. If and when the doctor gives you a letter, check in with the Rav to make sure everything is okay. Because sometimes the doctors are chacham, they're going to write, they're not a nida. I checked, everything's beseder. That wasn't the shaila. The shaila is, there was dam. We have to attribute the dam to something. We have to find something to be toil of the dam on. To give the doctor to give a psak, that's not what we ask the doctor to do. We have now a shaila, and we have to know how to attribute this shaila. Is it dam nidus or is it dam makkah? So it's important that the Rav should read the letter because sometimes the doctor knows it all, and they're the ones who gave the psak. And I'll tell you a secret, many times they're wrong. They don't know what they're doing. I went past the cervix, but don't worry, there was no blood. Shkoyach. They didn't learn what this means. They don't know that ain't things like everything like that. So it's very important to check in. If it happened, you have to ask a shaila or present the letter to make sure that everything's okay. So again, back to when you're going for an exam, again, it's important to know which exam you're going for. It's important to know how deep the doctor is going, and it's important to know what kind of tool the doctor is using. If you can get a name, great. Probably all you're going to get is a catheter. So it's very important to ask how wide, how thick this catheter is. To the point. It's the difference between 2 millimeters and 3 millimeters, or 4 millimeters and 5 millimeters, and makes the world of a difference. So if they don't know, ask them to measure it. It's not a big deal. And the third thing is to ask, after the procedure, was there dam or not? Right? So even though, let's say, the match was less than the shear, for there to be a problem of emsichas hakever b'leidam, we went past the cervix into the rechem, but l'maisa there was dam. So you're right, you don't have a problem it's at the psicham, it's at the maksha going in, which itself is a problem, but let's say it's less than the shear, but if in actuality there was dam, that itself is a problem, unless we can attribute it to a makkah. If the doctor can write a letter, as was mentioned before, that no, this dam that was seen is not from the uterus, rather, as the procedure was being performed, I scratched this in this place, and that's where the dam is coming from. So it's very, very important. You have to know the name of the procedure, how deep they're going, how thick the tool is, and whether or not there was blood. If there was, you have to find out where it's coming from.
Do you find that doctors use such terms that are not greater than malpractice, or if they did anything, or if they...
This is why we asked for a letter.
No, you can, but again,
Oh, it's a
you
good
trust
check.
them on it. If they did something, I don't know, like you said,
So the answer to that is they don't mind, and the reason is because it has no medical shlachas. It has no medical repercussions.
doctor's writing, oh, I scratched something.
No, but he's
No,
saying
no,
that
no,
even
no,
if
there's
they
no ma- even
even
if
if they
it's
scratched it, there's no medical repercussions.
There's no, they
There's
can't
no
even show.
malpractice.
There's no malpractice. If somebody scratched, that's a regular thing that happens in my
There
procedure.
was malpractice and they did cause something to happen.
So you can sue them.
I'm saying, but...
So they're not going to give you a letter.
When you sue the doctor, you lose
No,
money.
I'm saying
You
if
sue the law.
something happened, they did something wrong. I don't know. They did something wrong.
So
Keep the questions to after.
All right, Rabbi, so let's keep the questions for later. Let's keep on going.
So, just to answer on one foot, I've never seen a doctor hold back, not just in New York, people are calling from out of town. From my experience, I never ever saw that a doctor didn't want to answer. If it happens, you call it the Shiur because there is what else to be saying on the Shiur, the Shiur. We mentioned by IUD. Everyone knows what IUD is. It's a type of birth control. It's inserted into the rechem. It's important to note that it's a problem. It does render one nida, and not just putting it in, but also taking it out. It does render one nida. So often the phone call is, I had it in, but 2 days later I'm seeing spotting. Is that spotting a problem? Often, l'chatchila, a person forgets to ask, was the procedure itself an issue? So we're just mentioning it in IUD. This is that klal an issue. It could be matama, and one shouldn't wait for the spotting to start to ask a shayla, but you have to know the procedure itself is possibly problematic.
Would it be problematic? I'm sorry? Isn't it always problematic because it's...
Honest, yeah, but
For the Tuvia, once they have to do a procedure regarding scheduling with the
oh, very good. Now that we know that there's dinim connected to procedures, when can you schedule? When should you schedule the procedures? So it depends. If you know in advance it's a problematic procedure, problematic meaning not problematic, but it could cause you issues when it comes to the status, when do you schedule it? So sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to do it, it's time sensitive. This procedure has to be done. Either sometimes there's a growth, a polyp, whatever it is in the rechem, and you have to take it out, the sooner the better. If you have no choice, you have no choice. It is what it is, and safety first, so to speak. You have to do the procedure, and it may be inconvenient, but that's what it is. If you have a choice, when should you schedule the procedure? So if you know in advance, this is one of the procedures which cause nida, so you should try to schedule it before the hefsek tada. If you can get, again, you're not always going to get the appointment, but at least what you're aiming for is day 5 from the re'iyah. Sometimes you can get an appointment, even if it's going to cost you a day or 2, day 6, day 7, it's kedai to do it before the hefsek tada is made. And then it's pushed off only a few days. If you do it in the middle of Shiur Nikim, again, if you have to do it, you have no choice. You don't have to feel bad. It is what it is. But just have in mind that you may have to restart. A pap smear, the etzem, there's no problem to do it during the Shiur Nikim. But as we mentioned, a pap smear does cause spotting. So it's very important to note, make sure you do it after you already have a clean hefsek tada, after you have a clean bedik on day 1. If you do it in the middle, you will see spotting, and therefore it's kedai to call the Rav and ask if you can do less bedikas, because you will find dam, and it's damaka. Ask if you do only on day 7, that way you have Rishon or Shmi, and you have what you need for the Shiv Nakim. This is an interesting halacha. Kuf Pehei, we have a special din. If a lady says, I'm a nida, you're stuck. There's a din of Shavia Nafsha Chaticha D'Asura. Somebody has the ability to make themselves into a married person, into a nida. They can change their status with their dibur. The lamdas behind it, the Gemara B'Subas, the Alter Rebbe, and the Shchita, the Chotes Achron, will leave it out. The reality is, the Torah gave a koyach to a person that they're kiviyachal a bezdin on themselves. That's the way the Alter Rebbe learns. And you can be geyser, so to speak, on yourself, different dinim. It's a very hard sugya. There's a Sefer, there's no Yehuda. There's no Rishonim on the sugya. So in the Havana, it's very, very difficult. But Allah L'maisa doesn't change. If somebody says, Tumei Ani, I'm a nida, the status actually changes to a nida even without any dam.
What's with Pesha so Pashete?
You need a master.
And the Rambam says she gives an excuse.
Oh, we're going to get there. Very good. And a master. Yeah, we're going to get there in a second. So, a practical application. What do you see from this halacha? Don't get into a fight with your wife. She'll get you. So we have a few ways out. There's something called an amasla. You can't just say, I was joking. I was joking doesn't help. There was once a story that happened in Yerushalayim, the Knei Beisim. Rabbi Ransdorfer, his son, has a Beis Yedah in Eretz Yisrael. He took over his father, and he puts out his Sfarim Heichal Yirah, it's called, and he writes all the stories that happened, obviously without names, but just the stories that happened. And he brought down this din that a lady was so excited, she got pregnant, and she wanted to have fun, so to speak, with her husband, to make it more exciting, and to say that I'm a nida. Then later on to surprise him, by the way, I'm pregnant. Stuck. Why are you stuck? Because it doesn't help to say I was joking, but rather you need an amasla. Amasla means emes loy, but an amasla means I didn't say it only because kach v'kach. To say I was joking or I wanted to lighten up the mood, that doesn't help. The example brought in the Shulchan Aruch is your mother was in town, your sister was in town, and I was very uncomfortable, so I just said it to whatever. I don't have time to start explaining. I just said it quickly. That's why I said it. But B'etzem I'm not an Eden, and that's the reason why I said it. That's an acceptable amasla. It's an acceptable excuse, explanation. If she was chayzer teich kedei dibur, also the Ramah brings that helps. From the Beinoni Yerucham. And a very common thing is when a person genuinely thought the flow was coming, right? As we mentioned earlier, some people may have very, very gray areas of when the flow starts. So they know my flow is coming, I saw something, it must be, this is it. So what did she do? She assumed this is the period, so she told her husband, I'm a nida. The next day, a whole 24 hours passed, and nothing happened. She calls the Rav and said, I found a Kasimov on a beged tzavua, on a colored garment, and I didn't see anything else, there's no flow. What's my status? The Rav says, it's good. You're not a nida. What's the follow-up question? But I already said I'm a nida, it's not a problem. So we have a shach in Kuf Pehei that writes that if a lady was machzik herself as a nida, because she saw blood, but later on she discovered it was coming from a makkah. It's not a problem. Because she was machzik herself as a nida b'tovos, as a mistake. So you have an amasla, you have a proper valid excuse, not just a joke. And you have, if she said it b'tovos, if she said it by mistake, that also works. It's miyusan on the shach. Ramesha, we don't have so much time. We don't want to start a new topic of our chakras. What's better? What's a better thing to do?
It's up to the crowd.
We can
The
start
Meister Rabbi Kasimov Shiur started at 11 o'clock, and he took time. We came here. At this time, we can either go to questions or people want to continue the Shiur. Huh?
No questions.
Well, that's not what Shiur continue. Anybody has questions, I'll go around and give you a question.
Okay, so we'll start with our chakas. We'll cover as much as we could. As soon as the questions come in, if they come in, we'll deal with them.
Here, question.
Anybody has questions? What?
Becky, your questions.
11:25.
Another.
Okay, we'll start quickly with our chakas. We'll see how much we can cover. If there's questions. Smart man. Smart man. Okay. But sometimes you do want the questions, because if you're too machmer, you want answers. You want to be told it's good.
I think you have to worry about this crowd.
Okay, we'll start quickly with our chakras. I want to point out, when I was originally learning, I was told it's smart, and I later saw it in the Chalmud Daniel. It goes like this: the Mei Tarasa of Matara of a Rav is to keep him close as possible, meaning if there's a shayla, to look to be retired. So we can be samach on different kulas. It's used in halacha also, but when it comes to our chakas, you don't play around. Even if it's a tzad to be mekel, you don't want to be mekel. And it's very simple. Can anyone guess why not? One thing leads to the other in simple English, right? You're lenient in one thing, you open a Pesach. Again, I say kach, I say kach. And I don't want to continue, but you can imagine. So it's important when it comes to our chakas, you don't play around for your own good. And I want to mention the Gemara brings b'shem Rabbi Meir, it's brought in the Pesachim, that ultimately the nida process is really for your own good. What's the explanation behind it? Rabbi Meir brings that Torah gave us this mitzvah that when there's a prisha for 12 days, or some people have it longer, whatever it is, a month, when it comes the time that they're supposed to be together, she's chaviv olav kiyem knisasa lechuppah. If there was a non-stop heter of kiruv, you're going to be rogel v'kotzba. You're going to come to a point where, I maxed out my relationship, so to speak, and there's no more excitement. So the reality is, the Torah gave these dinim not just because to make life difficult or to make life hard, but in the ultimate purpose is that the yerida, so to speak, is l'tzorech aliyah, because for the ultimate purpose of a husband and wife to have a healthy relationship, pasha b'gashmis, that's what Rabbi Meir is talking about. Shalom yehei ragel v'katzba, he shouldn't be bored from her, so to speak. I'm using lashon nekiah. He shouldn't be. That's what the Torah gave us these dinim. Leman hashalom, pasha leman shalom bayis. So the approach to our chakas is sai as a siyah, but not to chalil be over on an iser. And together with that, in the same dinim, you also have that ultimately these chakas are here to make your life better down the road. And more than that, if a relationship is only based on the gashmius, you don't have a relationship. If you have a time of month when you can invest in other aspects of the relationship, be a chacham, use it out. Don't waste your time and say,
For example?
spend some time. Spend some time, talk to each other.
Get to know.
I learned to say board.
What?
I learned to say board.
Question on that. Does tznius trump hachakas?
Sorry?
Does tznius trump hachakas?
Let's try.
Does tznius override hachakas? In other words, let's say you make kiddush Friday night, you had your in-laws over.
Yeah.
Right, your father was standing right next to you, and generally you hand the cup to your wife. Now you put the cup down on the table.
Yeah.
It's blatantly clear.
Very, very good shayla. Everyone heard the shayla. There's tznius where you're holding between Beinoni Leveina, I should say. Does that override, so to speak, the dinim of harchakis? The answer is no, it doesn't. But I also want to share a story for Kert. Sorry. There's a minute, whatever. I'm not going to leave that on the side. But I wanna share a story for Kert. The story goes as follows. There's a famous Kala teacher in Eretz Yisrael, I can say her name, Mrs. Pekarsky. Somebody once has it over something in her name. She said, instead of being so worried that people are going to find out and get embarrassed that it's the time of Nida, it's punkt verkehrt. Why are you advertising that you're in the time of Tahara? People are going to know what you did last night. So it's punkt verkehrt. Why are you so embarrassed to advertise that it's a time of Archakes? If we're talking about tznius over here, it's punkt verkehrt. You don't want to advertise what did or did not happen.
The flip side is keeping most of the pockets in public, which not everybody wants to do. Not
I'm just taking the time.
Even people that are very, very pro don't want to keep all that pockets in public.
Want to pass a big back in public and
Right. You mix it up.
What's that? No, that's the kids. It's attachments, but it's not. With the Ramah, it doesn't work. We'll leave it in a second. So Al Kapanim. So to answer that shayla, the kitzur, it's a very, very good shayla. And how do you know it's a good shayla? Because it's discussed in the Peskin. If the Peskin discuss it, it means it's a valid shayla. It's Eila al Shulchan Malachim, the Chachamim are down on it. So the reality is, you got to be creative sometimes. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's not geschmack to advertise, so to speak, when you're holding. But I'll tell you a secret that for some reason nobody knows. Nobody cares. Nobody cares except for
Everyone goes through it.
Everyone goes through it, and nobody cares. Even your in-laws, if they're still holding at that stage of life.
And if they're not, they went through it.
Very good. And I'll tell you a secret.
That's the question.
And I'll tell you a secret. The Rav, we ask your shaylas to also go through it. This is something which is normal. If you don't go through it, Amram, the question's on that. So the answer is.
Who does the Rav ask the shaylas to?
You have Shach, you have Tosfos.
No, you
Tosfos ben the guy.
It helps the
So Tosfos Medayik, it doesn't say. So Al Kapanim, where are we holding the last track? Oh, it doesn't make a difference. The reality is everyone goes through it. Is it uncomfortable? The answer is sometimes yes. Especially in Shabbat brachos, everyone's looking at you. Everyone, you're going to start. But the reality is, Torah and we got to do it. So to make it easier, you got to be creative. You got to, don't make it competitive so much. And the reality is, most of the times, nobody cares. And even if people are looking, people have so many things in their mind, they don't care what's going on with you. I have this business deal that is eating me up. I'm looking at things, but my mind is somewhere else completely, right? That's what people are holding in life. So do they really care? I hope not. Probably not. But if they do, jokes on them. That's right. If they do, then it's jokes on them, they need help. So upon them, the answer is yes. Achag have to be kept b'rabim no matter what. Okay, Amar Hashem, this is what it is. And achachem einu b'reishei, be creative. If you feel you're going to be uncomfortable, try to sit in a way milachatchila that'll be less violent, that people are not going to realize so fast what you're thinking, because they don't really care.
If you
So
sit
the
across
answer
the
is that
table.
our chuppahs
Yes.
do trump dinner. Do trump siyas.
Yes.
Even Barabban.
Even B'Rabban, absolutely, yes.
You sit across the table, so you have to put it down regardless. Give it to someone else. You just push this.
So what?
Okay, so it's 5 minutes, should start.
No, you have
But
to
then-
ask your wife. Naya, ask your wife if she's uncomfortable. What do you care? You're never uncomfortable. Ask her. Are you uncomfortable?
My kid is, are you allowed, you have to put it down back on, because if you're passing it forward,
Very good. Very good Shiloh. There's not so much time, so we'll just go straight to the Shiloh. By Kiddush, there's an Isser of sending wine to your wife. It's a special din which is only on the husband, not on the wife. The wife has no problem to send wine to the husband. There's a special din on the husband. He's not allowed to send wine to his wife. Now, most of the times, it's only by Kiddush. You don't really have more application. You could, by a simcha, whatever it is, please pass the wine, but I want my wife to try this wine. To Ima, whatever it is, but it's mostly by Kiddush. So what do? If you're not allowed to send wine, there's two eitzes. Either number one, you put your becher down and she comes and takes it. So you didn't send it to her, you didn't give it to her, you put it down. Number two, many people, what they could do is, if you're the one making Kiddush for everyone, you have a bunch of cups in front of you, you pour each one into a different cup.
Chayla versus Nida. Same thing.
Okay, fine. So you put it, you pour it around, and that way you never sent her a cup. You poured wine, and everyone comes and takes a random cup. You were never miyached anything to send to her.
Is she allowed to drink from your cup?
Oh, very good. So to eat shirayim, or to drink shirayim, the Neisa Kalim are done. If you learn one from the other, it's also Kasa B'Kevitz, whatever it is, the answer is she's allowed to eat your shirayim and to drink your shirayim. You are not allowed to drink her shirayim.
once you drink some of your cup, you have to spill out the rest.
Oh, so there's a few Hatayim added it. The Ramah brings. So one of the eights for that is, again, if we continue next week, we'll go on Seder, but it's limited on time. The Isser of drinking her shirayim is, the Ramah writes, if she left the room, you're allowed to drink the leftovers. Because Shtiebel brings a feel if she walked back in the middle of the Shtiyah, you're allowed to finish the cup. And another Shtiebel brings V'hodin, if she became a nida as you were drinking her shidayim beheta, she doesn't have a chiyuv to tell you to stop you. So you started drinking beheta. So the halacha is you're allowed to finish it off. Another eitzah, if you want to drink your wine shirayim, there's a lot left over, you don't have so much, you're hungry, you can take it from one keli, pour it into another keli, and you can drink from the second keli. Another thing you can do is, if you pour it back into the original keli, that's also fine. As long as it's left over here, even if you put it back, that doesn't take away the heter that you're allowed to drink from it. What does not work is, she finished, the cup was this full, she drank this much, you can't just fill it back to the top and drink from it. That's still considered her leftovers. Rather, the cup has to be emptied into another cup, and then you can drink from it.
Address Chayla versus Nida.
So, Gabi the Shiloh was asked earlier, sometimes there's a matzav of chayli. If Chalila, the husband or the wife, are sick, they're bedridden, and the Gashmirs, they need help. It happens. Or sometimes they need to take needles. People are going through certain treatments, whatever it is, you need daily shots at the same time. And sometimes the wife can't do it for herself. And often it's going to come out, Beinoni also. So it's very hard to give this bit out, but